Have you ever had a day where nothing is wrong, but you don't feel like yourself, and no one sees it? Because from the outside, everything looks normal, yet everything inside you feels off. Hello, and welcome back to From the Therapy Room Psychology of Mind and Body, understanding how we think, feel, pattern, and become. I'm your host, Jyoti, a clinical counseling psychotherapist. I'm really glad you're here. You're welcome to follow this space and stay connected. This is a space where we gently explore the inner landscape of human mind, where psychology meets lived experiences, and where the stories we carry inside finally find language. In this podcast, we explore the psychology behind everyday emotional experiences, the things we often struggle to understand within ourselves but feel very deeply in our day to day life. Back to what we are going to talk today. You check your phone, no bad news. You replay yesterday, nothing really happened. And still, there is this heaviness you cannot explain. And then come the most exhausting part, trying to prove yourself that your feeling is valid. But what if the real problem isn't your mood? And what if it's the belief that you need a reason to feel it? There are days like this. Wake up and nothing is wrong. No bad news, no conflict, no obvious reason. And yet something inside you feels very heavy. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet, persistent weight. And almost immediately another voice comes in. Why am I feeling like this? There is no reason. I shouldn't feel this way. And without realizing it, the feeling becomes a problem. Today, I want to sit beside that moment with you, not to fix it, not to rush it away, but to understand it deeply, gently, and honestly. Because what if nothing is wrong with you and everything you're feeling actually make sense? Walk through a day like this. You wake up, and before you even open your eyes, there is a slight heaviness in your body. Nothing dramatic in a way, just a reluctance to begin. You reach for your phone, scroll a little, not because you want to, but because you don't want to sit with that feeling yet. You get up, start your routine, and everything looks normal from the outside. But inside, there is a quiet distance. You are there, but not fully there. Conversations feel like slightly effortful. Smiling feels slightly intentional. And somewhere in the background, there's a question you keep ignoring. Why do I feel like this when nothing is wrong? Let me try to step inside your mind for a moment. Not the part you show people, but the quieter, more private layer I'm talking about here. It sounds like it sounds something like this. Why do I feel like this? I should be okay, or other people have real problems. What is wrong with me? And then it gets subtler. Maybe I'm just ungrateful. Maybe this is just who I am. Maybe something is wrong with me that I can't see. And just like that, a simple low feeling turns into a quiet erosion of self worth. Starts as feeling, quickly becomes a loop. The feeling says something is off. The mind responds, why? No answer comes but. So the mind creates one, maybe I'm the problem. And now the feeling deepens. This is how mood turns into meaning and meaning turns into identity. Not because it's true, but because the mind is trying to make sense of something it cannot see yet. And then the mind starts doing what it does best. Maybe I didn't sleep well. Maybe it's my hormones, or maybe I'm just tired. Then there is kind of pause. Or maybe something is actually wrong with me. And that thought doesn't come loudly, it comes quietly, convincingly. We have been taught so many things. Another thing we have been taught in a very subtle, deadly, that emotion must be justified. Sadness needs a story. Low mood needs a cause. Pain needs a proof. But psyche doesn't work like a courtroom, right? And if we try to see it from a humanistic psychology lens, think of Carl Rogers. Emotions are not problems to be solved, they're experiences to be felt and understood. When you feel low for no reason, it's not that there is no reason, it's that the reason is not conscious yet. And that's a very different thing. There is something I often notice in therapy room. Don't struggle with their feelings as much as they struggle with not understanding their feelings. And the moment we stop trying to explain them, something softens. Not everything you feel belongs to today. What you wake up with is what yesterday didn't get to express. A conversation you brushed off, a moment you swallowed your reaction, or a small hurt you told yourself was kind of not a big deal. Your mind moves on, but your nervous system remembers everything. Research in affective neurosciences like work of Antonio Damasio suggests that emotions are deeply tied to bodily states. They don't just disappear because you ignored them, they linger, they accumulate, and they wait. I remember a client once said, I don't understand why I feel so low today. Yesterday was perfectly fine. And as we slow down, something small emerged, a moment where her partner dismissed her mid conversation. Laughed it off. She told herself it's nothing, but her body didn't agree. What she felt the morning was not random, it was unprocessed emotional residue. Research on emotional carryover shows that unresolved emotions can linger across days, affecting mood without conscious awareness. Also shown that emotion don't reset overnight. What we don't process doesn't appear. It simply changes form and weights. Sometimes it's not one big thing. It's 10 small moments. Being slightly unheard in a conversation, pushing your own need aside, saying it's okay when it wasn't fully okay, and holding back a reaction to avoid discomfort. None of these feels important enough in the moment, but emotionally they really accumulate. And what you feel the next day is the weight of all the moment you didn't fully feel. Another perspective, like from trauma informed kind of perspective, your emotional state is often less about what happened and more about what your nervous system is holding. You can feel low simply because your system is in a dorsal vagal state, a shutdown, low energy mode. Not because something bad happened today, but because your system is tired, overloaded, or protecting you. Think about it: chronic stress, subtle anxieties, emotional suppression, and overthinking. All of this create an internal load. And sometimes your system simply says, today we slow down. But instead of listening, interpret it as failure. If this is you waking up tired without knowing why, feeling slightly disconnected, even in familiar spaces, this isn't laziness, this isn't weakness. What we feel, or when we feel low for no reason, we usually try to distract, fix, or override it. But what we often need is to say just a little longer than we are comfortable with. This is your system trying to tell you something in a language you haven't been taught to. So if you shift your attention from your thoughts to your body, you might notice something very subtle here. Your shoulders slightly heavy, your breath not as deep, and your chest carrying a quiet pressure. This is important because your body often feels the truth before your mind understands it. According to polyvagal theory, your nervous system is constantly scanning for safety, even when you're not aware of it. So sometimes a low mood isn't about something happening, it's about your system not feeling safe enough to be fully alive in that moment. Just pause for a moment. Don't fix anything. Don't analyze. Just notice. Where in your body do you feel this low the most? Is it heaviness in your chest, tightness in your throat, or just a quiet emptiness? That place is where your story is waiting. Once told me, I wish something bad would happen. At least then I would know why I feel this way. And that stayed with me somehow. Because sometimes the hardest feeling are the one that don't come with a story. And one of the quietest struggle here is this: you're trying to think your way out of a feeling. You analyze your day, you scan for reasons, you reply conversations, but emotions don't resolve through logic. They resolve through being felt, being processed, and metabolized. So the more you try to figure it out, the more distant it can start to feel. What you feel without reason often belong to what Carl Jung called the sad shadow. These are parts of you that you learn to suppress, you were told were too much, or simply never had a space to exist. Sadness without a story can sometimes be grief that never had permission. Irritation without a cause can be anger you learn to silence. And disconnection can be a self that never felt fully seen. And sometimes what you are feeling isn't coming from your current life at all. It comes from a younger version of you who learned not to ask for too much, who adjusted quickly, who stayed quiet to keep things stable. And now, in moments of stillness, that part of you surfaces, not with words, but as a feeling you can't quite explain. This kind of feeling is often misunderstood as sadness, but sometimes it's closer to loneliness. Not the kind where no one is around, but the kind where no one feels close enough to your inner world in that moment, even you. And this kind of low mood doesn't stay inside you, it quietly enters your relationship. Dramatically but subtly. You reply a little later than usual. You cancel plans, not because you don't care, but because you don't have the energy to be present. Someone asks, "Are you okay?" And you'll say, "Yeah, I'm fine, I'm perfect." Not because you're hiding something big, but because you genuinely don't know how to explain something so unclear. And over time, this create a distance. Not because you don't love people, but because you don't fully feel reachable in those moments. In the therapy room, this is where people feel the most misunderstood, not because others don't care, but because their experience doesn't have a clear language. Time, if this pattern repeats, people can start relating to you based on your functioning self, not your emotional self. See you as capable, stable, reliable, but not necessarily as someone who needs holding. And slowly, you might start feeling alone even in connected spaces. There's also this moment, maybe you have experienced it, with people laughing, talking, everything looks fine, and suddenly there's this quiet awareness. I don't feel as connected as I'm supposed to right now. And instead of expressing it, you lean into a version of you that knows how to function. And that's the moment where disconnections deepens. Not because others are far, but because you had to step away from yourself. And sometimes the low feeling is not about today, as I have shared earlier, it's about something much older. At times, moments of stillness can activate a subtle question inside us. Am I okay? Am I alone? Or does anyone really see me? If your early environment had inconsistencies, emotional absence, or unpredictability, your system may still carry that print. So, when nothing has happened, your mind becomes quiet, your distractions pause. That's when these deeper emotional echoes rise. Not loudly, but enough to be felt. And at some point in your life, you may have learned that your feelings were too much, too inconvenient, or too unclear. So instead of expressing them, you learn to move past them quickly. Now, even when something is happening inside you, there is a reflex to dismiss it. It's nothing, but your system remembers, even when you don't pause long enough to listen. Once a high functioning professional shared it with me that my life is objectively good, but some mornings I feel empty somehow. Over time, we uncovered a childhood pattern. I'm talking about my what happened inside a therapy room with me with one of my client. Over time, we uncovered a childhood pattern. Achievement brought attention, but emotional needs were often unmet. So now, in stillness, without performance, without distraction, there is a quiet return of that unmet space. One of the most misunderstood experiences is this: you're functioning, you're working, you're showing up, but inside, something feels missing. And because your life looks fine, you don't allow yourself to take your feeling seriously. Sometimes what you're calling low, it isn't even sadness, it's just numbness. And numbness is not the absence of feeling, it's the nervous system protecting you from feeling too much. Feel guilty of feeling low when life is fine. I know there's a very specific kind of, I'm talking very specific kind of guilt that comes with this experience. Your life looks okay, maybe even good, and yet you don't feel okay. And that creates a conflict inside. I should be happy, so why am not? Instead of listening to that feeling, you start invalidating it. But emotion don't respond to logic, they respond to attention. There is also something called emotional granularity, the ability to accurately identify what you're feeling. And when this is low, everything starts to feel like just low or off. But underneath that could be subtle grief, disappointment, loneliness, emotional fatigue. So when we can't differentiate, we feel overwhelmed by something we can't name. We live in a world that subtly demands emotional consistency. Be productive, be positive, be okay, and something like that. So when you're not okay for no reason, you don't feel just low, you feel wrong for feeling low. And that second layer, the judgment, often hurts more than the feeling itself. Try to notice it gently. When you feel low without a reason, do you become kinder to yourself or more critical? Because that response often tells you more about your emotional history than the feeling itself. A split that develops over time. The functional self, the one that works, responds, shows up, and manages life, and the felt self, the one that experiences, senses, and needs and feels. And on day like this, the functional self is active, but the felt self is distant. And that distance is what you experience as low. So, what if today's feeling didn't need to be explained? What if instead of asking, why do I feel like this, you gently ask, what might this feeling be holding? Not to analyze, but just to listen. Because sometimes healings begins not when you understand your emotions, but when you stop arguing with them. Someone once said in one of my sessions that I think I only allow myself to feel when something big happens. And maybe that's what we have learned. And only big pain deserve attention, but a small, quiet heaviness deserves spaces too. Because sometimes this low feeling is not psychological alone, it's existential. And quiet question beneath the surface, is this all there is? Or am I truly connected to my life or just moving through it? And that question doesn't come with urgency, it comes with a subtle emptiness. What changes everything is not solving this feeling, but allowing it to exist without turning it into a problem. Because the moment you stop resisting it, it often softens on its own timeline. So if today feels heavy, even slightly, even quietly, you don't have to justify it. You don't have to fix it immediately. And you don't have to turn it into a problem. Maybe something in you is simply asking to be felt. And maybe just for today, that is enough. So maybe today, instead of trying to solve your mood, you just sit with it like you sit with a tired child. Not asking question, not demanding explanation, just staying until it feels a little less alone. So maybe this feeling is not random, it is just untranslated. If you if you go a little deeper beneath this low feeling, there is often something quieter and a little more vulnerable. It's not just why do I feel like this? Sometimes it's what if this doesn't go away? What if this is just how I am? And what if I'm slowly losing something inside me? And that fear is rarely spoken out loud, but it's felt. And maybe what makes these days heavy is not just the feeling itself, but the meaning we have afraid it might hold. What if this feeling is not a sign that something is wrong with you, but a sign that something inside you hasn't been given enough space to exist? Not everything that feels heavy is negative. Some of it simply expressed life. And maybe today is not the day to fix yourself, but a day to stay a little closer to what you usually move past. Not every low day is a breakdown. Some are just your soul asking you to slow down and come closer. Thank you for spending this time with me today. This has been from the therapy room, psychology of mind and body, understanding how we think, feel, pattern, and become. If this resonated with you, you can share with what you felt or noticed. I would love to hear your reflections. And if you find these conversations meaningful, you can follow or subscribe to this podcast. Feel free to share it with someone who might need to hear it. So these spaces of reflection can continue to be a part of your journey. Until next time, take care of your mind, your body, and the quiet spaces within you. Next time, I'll be sitting next besides to you. Take care.